Good evening, everyone. My name is Marie-José Grotenhuis, and I'm a member of tonight's organizing group and also a volunteer at Splendor. Let me welcome the members of the panel, Mirjam van Reisen. To my left, Gebrekirstos Gebremeskel. I studied hard on this. Nyssen and Alex de Waal, two via stream. And I know everybody has been working terribly hard to get this big screen behind me so that they would be there. But unfortunately, technology did not what it promised to do. And so they're here on a very small screen. But you're here. Can you hear me? No, even not.
Here. Hello,
I can hear you.
Alex, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly well.
I can hear you too. That's great. And Nyssen, can you hear me?
Of course. Good evening. I am here.
Okay, great. So everybody's here. And we'll look intensely at you at the small screen, and we'll be listening to you very well. Let me first introduce our speakers. Mirjam is a professor at Leiden and Tilburg, and she has been long involved in the fight against human rights violations in Eritrea. She has been particularly involved in the trafficking of refugees. And we have really to compliment her with her book that recently is published, Enslaved, Trapped and Trafficked in Digital Black Holes. And she has also been sued by Eritrean regime supporters in the Netherlands for it. So she knows the long arm of Eritrea by experience. And since the Tigray war, she has been very much involved in writing and speaking about it. And Nyssen is professor at Ghent University. He has lived and worked in Ethiopia and Tigray since the start of this century, written books, and since the war broke out, he has been very active in collecting data as far as possible and seeking publicity around the massacres, famine, starvation, and blockade in Tigray. Alex de Waal is director of the World Peace Foundation. He has a long history in Ethiopia, also before the war. He has written many books on the politics of the Horn of Africa, human rights, mass starvation, and more. And since the war broke out, he has been speaking, writing, and being the voice of Tigray. And to my right, I just say Gebre because that's easier. Researcher and founder of TGAT. Do I pronounce it?
TGAT, yeah.
TGAT, okay. Documenting the war in Tigray as far as possible to prevent that there would not only be a genocide, but also that it would be kept hidden to the world, as is the plan of the regime in Addis. He's also on the verge of defending his PhD in modern technologies and their impact on society, which is not the title of his thesis, by the way. Without these four people, we would not have known what we know now. So thank you all for your hard work and effort. And again, we're happy to have you in this discussion. Yesterday, I found the announcement of a cultural evening in an art room in Zurich tomorrow evening, and we are very happy to see that initiatives like ours are flourishing and hope they contribute to justice for Tigray. Well, to our questions, I first wanted to ask something to Alex. The Patriarch of Ethiopia's Orthodox Church says genocide is committed in Tigray. And Senator Menendez, who is the chairman of the Committee on Foreign Relations of the Senate of the USA, has sent a letter to President Joe Biden on March 17, 2022, saying that Ethiopia has committed genocide in Tigray. The BBC talks about 700 to 800 deaths. Why, Alex, are heads of state and officials like Antonio Guterres of the UN still so reluctant to speak about genocide? Can you explain a bit about this?
I wish I could explain why the leaders of the world, of the United Nations, the United States, Europe, and Africa have failed in their moral and legal obligations to recognize the sufferings of the people of Tigray and the crimes perpetrated against them. I think many of us who've looked at this agree that the acts constitutive of the crime of genocide, acts of forcible mass displacement, of ethnically targeted killing, rape, starvation, have been perpetrated, and that the public statements of leaders in Addis Ababa, in the Amhara region of Bahir Dar, and in Eritrea, display very clearly and publicly the intent to commit genocide. Even if we were to challenge those facts, it is indisputable that crimes that are widespread, systematic, and organized by the state have been perpetrated. That's crimes against humanity. And I really have no explanation other than moral cowardice why the leaders in Washington, in New York, many of those in Brussels and European capitals have remained utterly silent. I think it is completely shameful, and it is not only is it a shame that will dog them for the rest of their lives and the institutions that they had, but it is an ominous augur for the world in which we live.
Mirjam, do you want to add something to this, or are you as astonished as Alex is?
Yeah, I mean, Alex says it very clearly that with all the facts that are known on the ground, it is clear that what happened and the intention of it can certainly be seen as amounting to genocide. And I'm... Had already?
Yeah, you moet hem...
I just need to speak up, I think, sorry. Alex is absolutely right that what happened in Tigray can be seen as what would be constituting genocide. I just think that one of the reasons why it is so difficult to give that label is that it's a very heavy label. So it's a very political label, and it has a lot of consequences. So I think that that is the reason why there has been so much hesitation. However, the work that has now been done, and including also the work of Nyssen, and I think Jan will speak about that himself, has been very important to come with convincing evidence that what has happened in Tigray does really relate to all of the aspects that would make it relevant to define it as genocide. I'm speaking carefully because I do understand that it is a label that should not be used very lightly, and I think that therefore many have been careful to not use that as a political tool. But I'm absolutely convinced that what happened in Tigray constitutes genocide.
Okay. Nyssen, do you want to add something to the remarks?
Yes, I want to add some things. I'm not going into the definitions of genocide. It is a very difficult debate, and it's a bit out of my expertise. But I see two things also why Abiy, because to me, the main architect architected the whole thing is Abiy Ahmed. He called in the Eritreans to do all this. Why they get so easily away with it. And one is the lack of interest from the public opinion. The Gutierrez, the Bidens, the Charles Michel, and so on. If there would have been a strong outcry of public opinion in Europe and in the United States, they would have taken another stand. And unfortunately, and let me take an example in the media, if there is flooding in an American town and 3 or 5 people get drowned and get killed, it is all in the media in Europe. And I guess in the United States, it's vice versa, it's the same. Flooding happens in Europe and it will be in the media. But then it happens in Africa, oh, there is always war in Africa and we don't understand what is going on and we don't report about that. And I think I saw some, I must say in the last weeks, I've been interviewed by El País and Corriere della Sera and some big news outlets, but constantly their title is "The War You Have Never Heard of." This war is 2 years old. They are El País, Corriere della Sera are main newspapers in Spain or in in Italy. They didn't report about it. The public opinion doesn't know. I'm still of the '68 generation. I have known the coup d'etat in Chile with Pinochet. We were 16 years old. We were in the street demonstrating and crying, and our governments had to take a stand. We haven't seen this. Yeah, so it is very far in Ethiopia, and then it's easy for Gutierrez et al. Not to do anything. So that's one reason in my understanding. Another reason is that Abiy has been blackmailing them. If you are not kind to me, I will switch to the side of Russia and China. Mm-hmm. And that's a bit a realpolitik of geopolitics, and then, okay, let's close the eyes for Abiy. We have this Ukraine thing. First of all, we need to win this Ukraine war, and we keep silent about Abiy. I think these are 2 main things that have played, but of course the full story needs to be written.
So what you're saying, if I understand you well, is that there's not enough public pressure so that politicians can get away with whatever.
We have some very courageous politicians in all our countries, but they are a very minority, I would say.
They are very? They are minority. Okay, thank you. Let us start here by getting awareness about the subject, that we can contribute to get minority viewpoints to majority viewpoints. Mm-hmm. So, Mirjam, I have a question for you. Since November the 2nd, 2022, there is a peace agreement, officially a cessation of hostilities. Can you tell us something about it, the parties involved, and especially what has been implemented on the ground so far? What do you know about the recent developments there?
Well, so in Pretoria there were negotiations between the leaders of Tigray and the Ethiopian government. And so they signed a cessation of hostilities agreement. It's not actually a peace agreement, but it really was setting the ground for those negotiations. And what is good about that is that actually it has been holding more than what anybody could have hoped for at the time. So that is a really very good thing. And it also, I think, has given a space, an opening for people in Tigray to have access to the really basic needs, and for people to be able to phone home and so on. But at the same time, there's still very large parts of Tigray that are still occupied, and there's still a very large number of internally displaced people who are not being able to go home, especially in Western Tigray. And especially on the whole border, the northern area that borders Eritrea, the Eritrean troops are still present, although they have been claiming to withdraw. They have not, by and large, really withdrawn from those areas. So it's a mixed picture. It is good. I think what is really good is that the peace is holding. I think what is good is that politically there has been a wedge now between these two occupying forces, President Abiy from Ethiopia on the one hand, and then his kind of ally, coalition partner in crime, President Isaias on the other hand, as well as the Amharic forces. So these three forces are now divided, and that gives Tigray, for now, a breathing space.
Okay. Alex and Jan, do you have to add some to these views of
Maybe
Mirjam?
Alex first.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Let me make 2 points. The first is that the agreement that was made, the cessation of hostilities agreement that was made in Pretoria and then expanded upon somewhat in Nairobi in November, came about because of the overwhelming level of human destruction inflicted by the armies of Ethiopia and Eritrea. The Ethiopian chief of staff himself admitted that in 7 weeks of fighting, his army had lost 138,000 dead. That does not count the fatalities among the militia, which would likely be higher, or the Eritrean army, and of course does not include those on the Tigray side. A couple of weeks ago, he was discussing with his generals, and some of them objected to the ceasefire. And he said, over the course of the war, we lost 254,000 dead. And they said, that's not, what are you complaining about? We have 100 million people. We can continue losing people at this rate. We have no problem of human resources. The military equation at the end was that the government of Ethiopia was willing to sacrifice perhaps another 1 million of its young people against the guns of the Tigrayans and inflict famine on and mass starvation on the Tigrayans in order to get their way. And because the world was not ready to stand up and try and stop this, then the Tigrayans sued for peace. The second point I want to make is there is no political agreement here. This is purely a military agreement to stop the fighting and to provide some essential services and supplies. The only political element in the agreement is that the constitution of Ethiopia will be upheld, which makes one wonder, why was the war fought in the first place? Because it was actually the Tigrayans who were fighting to uphold the constitution, and Abiy was the one fighting to dismantle it. But the situation today in Ethiopia is something of a political enigma, a mystery, or a vacuum. We really don't know what the political deals that are being hatched are and what the political future of the country is going to look like.
Thank you. This is not a very optimistic statement, but we will come to that later also, talking about what we can expect for the future. Jan, do you have to add anything?
One point, maybe as an example of all the secrecy that is there. Both Eritrea and Amhara have not been named in this cessation of hostilities. They are simply called third party. And of course, for Eritrea, and how let me say, for Tigray, everybody understands their role, and there is big shouting that the Eritreans should go out. But the Amhara region continues to occupy something between 35 and 40% of Tigray's area, and 1 million of people have been expelled from Western Tigray. How can Tigray ever revive if you have 1 million people who are sitting in the towns, who don't have anywhere to go, who cannot return to their homeland? And unfortunately, the Tigray government is completely silent about the suffering of the people who have been expelled from Western Tigray. And so somehow there seems to be a secret deal about Western Tigray, and I'm very afraid.
Okay, so there's also not everything is on the table. That's what you're saying. And Tigray has suffered Gebrekirstos us already about it. From a total 36-degree physical blockade, shutdown of all basic services, food, healthcare, education, banking facilities, and total blockade of communication. Jan, what has this done to Tigray and the Tigrayans?
I wish I would have been there with them so that I could witness, and somehow, sometime, media should be able to reach out to Abamelaku, Father Angel, who is a Spanish missionary in Wukro. He has been living with the people through all this. He could tell much more than me. Tigrayans are telling me if Abiy could have shut down the sun over Tigray, he would even have shut down the sun over Tigray. And we have now contact with our colleagues in Mekelle University, and together we have set up a joint research project. And our colleagues of Mekelle University, they have gone to one district that is called Dogatemien. That's a district that I know very well. They went to 10 villages where we did field work before, and they have done repeat photography. They have done interviews with 102 people, and the outcome is harrowing, worse than we expected. People are telling us stories from every village. There have been killings. They tell us of mothers who die. People don't go to the hospital because they know there is nothing in the hospital. And then especially there is the famine, and they say this is the worst time we have ever known. Some people say even this is worse as the time when we were fighting against the Derg regime. It is really very, very bad. It is to the extent because you have this WFP guy who is claiming that there has never been, previous director in Ethiopia, who is claiming that there has never been famine in Tigray. This is a very big shame to say such thing as a responsible person of FWP. Let me give you one example. Of course, the people have explained that the harvest in 2022 has totally failed. It was even worse than in 2021. Food aid was not coming in, and they were selling their ox to get cash and to have cash to buy grain. And the exchange was, if you sell one ox, you get 50 kilogram of grain. Can you imagine what an ox has been eaten in his life as biomass, and that ox is then exchanged for 50 kilogram of grain? This means really people were selling the ox, they need it for plowing. This is not simply like pocket money that you have. An ox is really essential for their livelihood. But if your children are dying, you sell your ox and you get a meager 50 kilogram of grain. This is where people are. And then, this is one thing. Other part is the whole mental, the whole psychological, or shall I call it, disarray that people are in, because they know very well that the world has let them alone in all this. And even if everything could go fast now, Tigray is in such a disarray, it will take decades to recover from this disaster.
Thank you. All this news is not very good, and it's not very comforting. So when we think about the future, Gebre, do you think that Tigray and the Tigrayans will ever get justice, reparation and recognition? As far as we understand, the people who committed the crimes in the first place are also the people who, in the peace agreement, are the ones that are going to deliver justice. What are your hopes and fears for the future?
Yeah, that's the most difficult part about the Pretoria and then Nairobi peace agreements. Like Professor Mirjam said, it has brought a little bit of relief to parts of Tigray, but now the question of recognition of what has happened in Tigray, the question of justice and reparation have become a bigger questions for Tigrayans, and that is because the previously the party that was the TPLF fighting, mobilizing Tigrayans is now, as also some of the panelists said, has become mute. Is silent. It's not speaking for the atrocities that is still being committed upon the people of Tigray. But a larger picture is that the Ethiopian government, basically the party that is accused of committing genocide in Tigray, is now tasked with the work of delivering justice in what they call some kind of transitional justice framework. So, and this agreement happened with the help of the United States and the UN itself. And so basically, really, for me, what they are saying is simply, well, we don't care about recognition and justice and reparation for the people of Tigray. So this is myself and many Tigrayans are now extremely worried about this issue of this issue of the aspect of this war. So I'm not very optimistic about this, to be honest. Now, in practice, also we see the TPLF, the party that was fighting, and the Abiy regime really kind of like working in some kind of secret things that we don't understand. And we don't hear any talk about justice and about recognition of what has happened to people of Tigray. So really, this is a much more worrying issue for me, personally.
Okay. Would you like to add, Mirjam, because it sounds to me that this is also an aspect of the fact that it's not a political but a military agreement.
Well, I mean, the military has been very much involved in setting the terms of the agreement. I see it that way as well, but it also is very much a political-driven process, and this is really relating to the whole, geopolitical arrangement that is underlying what has happened in Tigray and where we are going from here. So the big questions that really still need to be addressed somehow is, how do we go to a status quo ante? How do we go back to how it was before this war started? So the issue of Western Tigray is a very political issue. You can see it. Jan has done a lot of work on the historic aspects of it, but it also is a very political issue which relates to the power base of Prime Minister Abiy. Then on the Eritrean side, there are huge problems, and we haven't spoken about those much now here tonight, but it's very, very complicated. It's actually fantastic to see here again tonight so many people from Tigray and Eritrea together, and it has been good that during this war there has been a lot of protests together and demonstrations together. But the atrocities committed by the Eritrean military in Tigray are unspeakable. So even before we can start talking about justice, we need to talk about recognition of what has happened, and all of those things are going to be a very difficult path of healing. But the problems in Eritrea are still, people have really, really suffered as a result of being forced to enter this war. Many, many people have died on that side as well. Families have not been informed about the death of people who were forced into this war, but have also inflicted unspeakable atrocities. So what I want to say is that this is really a very small step in a lot of very big problems that still need to be solved. And it's very important that we can speak about these things, and that is why it is really absolutely commendable that we have this event here tonight, and that we have this ability to kind of try and grapple with what has happened, and to try and find words even to begin to speak about these things.
Okay, thank you. I see that my time's up. So I just wanted one sentence of all of you. What can we as a public here that is interested and that wants to do something, what can we do to help the cause of Eritreans to get justice? Mirjam?
We need to do more of this. That's
More of
really
this.
the thing.
Jan?
I think what is very important that is for the Tigrayan Eritrean community who are opposed to this war, who want to make this known to the world, to reach out to their ordinary fellows in their home countries. When I see that communication, it is towards heads of states, as if the UN Secretary General will open any message that he receives from a Lambda Tigrayan person who lives in Europe. No, it makes no sense. The communication should be to the society in which or the Tigrayans and the Eritreans are living, and they have really to talk to their neighbors and friends, and we should really to try to reach out to the broad public.
Alex?
I think it is enormously important that the people who are the survivors of these, the most degrading, most humanity-denying abuses, their humanity is recognized, their dignity is recognized, and we just need to, at the absolute minimum, not forget what has happened and indeed what is continuing to happen, and make our voices heard. Even if there is no immediate impact on policies, it is a gesture of humanity, reaching out to the humanity of people who have endured a level of suffering that is beyond comprehension and almost beyond our understanding, beyond words. Let us at least express our common humanity with these people.
Thank you. Gebre?
I don't think I can add much to what they have said. I can only say this is not only about Tigrayans, it's about humanity, and we want you to help us create awareness wherever you go, to speak for the people that have been made voiceless for the past 2 years, that have been blockaded. And I think that's all I can ask, that you all can help us make some noise about the people of Tigray, create some awareness wherever we go, wherever we are.
Thank you all.
Are there any questions?
Is there any light so I can see hands?
Anne, zou je iets licht kunnen opdraaien?
Yes.
Yes, I see here.
Hello, my name is Daniel from Tigray. I live here for the past 30 years. But what I want to ask to the panelists is, why is it the humanitarian help was made part of the agreement in Pretoria, and has this happened ever somewhere in the past? Or is it a novum? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. What you are saying is, how can humanitarian aid be withheld until there is a cessation of hostilities? And of course, that in itself is a crime against humanity. So, what has happened in Tigray certainly constitutes Rome Statute crimes, which are the most severe crimes under international law. I think in the first answering of the question, I was just confused between the two questions that were in that question. One was, why did it not get the label of genocide? And the other question was it a genocide? So I think that, as you are pointing out, that withholding humanitarian assistance and the whole blockade in itself was absolutely would constitute, in my opinion, a situation that should be investigated as a Rome Statute crime. Yes.
Has this ever happened somewhere else? That the humanitarian help is part of a political settlement?
Well, I mean, certainly it is very particular that it happened here, and I would say that this entire blockade is something that maybe at this scale we have never seen before. And which is also one reason why the world doesn't know, because it was very, very difficult to follow the situation and to know anything about it. So, I mean, the journalists were not able to go. In fact, even from Ethiopia, they were removed if they were writing on the situation in Tigray. So that blockade made it very difficult to make sure that the world would know and that there would be that political follow-up. But other things like the 100,000 Eritrean refugees that were in Tigray under international protection and which were abducted back to Eritrea, the country from which they fled, and then forced back to fight into this war in the region that had been hosting them, that has never been seen in the world before. So there needs to be, and that I really do agree with Gebre, that we need to do a lot of documentation. I mean, for myself, every day since the 4th of November 2020, I have been doing a report on everything that I would know that had happened that day. And I remember it was very moving to hear Girmay speak about the situation in Aksum. I know when we got the first information in Aksum, and we were like, we cannot believe that this can be true. It was at a scale that was not imaginable. And so little by little, and it was one voice here and one voice there. And then as we actually published it, we got really criticized. People were saying, this cannot be true, and you have to withdraw this because have you proof? And then, in fact, we found that everything that had happened was even worse than what we had heard in those initial days. So the situation that we are in today is only allowing us a little bit of a reflection time to start thinking what has happened and where is everybody and where should we go. But we are not in any kind of way at the end of our thinking, what we should do, the justice that needs to come. This is something that is all in front of us, ahead of us in the future.
Anybody else a question?
Why? What is it about Tigray that they want to get and to kill? Why?
I think I can, I don't want to dominate the panel, but I think I want to speak to that because this started, and it was very naive in 2018 when there was the peace agreement. So Prime Minister Abiy had just become Prime Minister, actually with a lot of hope for many people because the situation in Ethiopia had been already difficult. So he became Prime Minister. It was actually a lot of things opened up. So it seemed to be a good time. And then he goes to Asmara to make this peace agreement with President Isaias. And President Isaias has led a dictatorship of the cruelest kind for 30 years. So anybody who was working or who comes from Eritrea knew that this was going to be bad news. And it has been more than bad news. And we're speaking about Tigray, but as Gebre was saying, all the Tigrayans or Tigrinya-speaking people that were put in camps in Addis Ababa, the taking over of intelligence and security by the Eritreans in Ethiopia. And tonight we have not spoken about the atrocities in Oromia, in other parts of Ethiopia. So, and that is, I mean, and that comes back to what is at the heart, that President Isaias survives by chaos. And so what he did was he created chaos of the worst kind. And so that occupied everybody for some time, and he has survived. And yesterday he was in Kenya to get even more havoc, becoming a member of IGAD. So that is one thing that also I am worried about, that we need to speak about what happened in Tigray. We need to speak about what happens in other parts of Ethiopia. But we also need to speak of the source of the problem. And President Isaias has to go, and he has to go to the ICC. And many will probably also say that Prime Minister Abiy needs to be held accountable. But President Isaias has had a big stake in what happened here.
I can also add a little bit on that. This is like a very complex issue, and I don't think we will be able to explain this now. But there's a historical reasons, but there is also current problems. So, as you know, if there are like big social problems, then you look for easy ways, like a scapegoat. So the Tigrayans were scapegoated for any problem in Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, who is, by the way, a Nobel Prize winner in peace. Yeah. It is a mockery, but that guy, I think he saw like all these factions could be unified by war. So it was an effort to unify the rest of Ethiopia by waging war against the Tigrayans. But there are like other level forces, like for example Eritrea, and there are neighboring regions to Tigray, like the Amharas. They have a long historical rivalry and even enmity. So it meant very different things for different people, and eventually at some point they converged to resolve it using this genocidal war.
My name is Solomon. My question to you, Gebre, is why is that there is no advocacy or support group from the Dutch public or politicians? Because you asked a very important question, like how can we support the Tigrayan cause? So why is no, because we used to have here in the 80s, like the El Salvador Committee, Nicaraguan Committee, and you had also the Anti-Apartheid Committee. A lot of support from the Dutch public and politicians. Why is it that there is no any public support for the Tigrayan cause? Thank you.
Well, this is probably more appropriate for the Dutch people here.
Well,
so why is there not support? I really do not know. I mean, I have my own opinions, I think there's some kind of fatigue in the world. Seems to me. In 1984, for example, when there was a problem in Ethiopia, what many older people probably know as the Great Ethiopian Famine, the amount of people that participated in mobilizing support or whatever seems like a very different time to me. And now it's very hard to really move people, it seems to me. Well, except you who have come here. The other thing is, I don't know, there is probably not so much geopolitical business interests, let's say, in Tigray. There are a lot of Dutch companies in Ethiopia, for example. We have counted about, I think, somewhere close to 100. But they are a little bit outside Tigray. And, I mean, for example, these are businesses. You would like to protect them somehow, and as long as it's not a big issue here, why would you speak about it, for example? But I think beyond that, honestly, I'm asking the same questions, and I would be very happy to hear why there is not from others, because it's also my question myself.
Okay, I think that for us who organized this evening, Jan Willem, where are you? And myself, and some other people present, this might be a starting point to see what we can do to get beyond this group and get awareness and bring it also to Dutch politics, because it's not a very big issue in Dutch politics. So we might as well make a new meeting next week and see what we can do.
We will. And one last question, then, because we've got dancers too who want to dance.
Okay, I'm from Angola. We had one of the most stupid civil war in the world. And I still don't get it, what's happened to Tigray. Okay, in Angola, in Africa, I know this, with all the colonizers, all these things, put different tribes together, make this war. But we are so happy, we are celebrating the Prime Minister of Ethiopia for this peace with Eritrea, you know. And then, since I met you, I didn't know enough about this, you know. And I still don't get it. Why? You know, maybe it's language, I don't know. I heard a lot of things, but I can't understand why. Why is these people be killing like that? And, you know, like, yeah, you say, like, before in the 70s, there was also every Angola committee here, you know, all this committee. And I'm happy that to see these people here to talk about that, but I still don't get why, you know, that is, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, many of us have been asking, how is it possible that the brothers and sisters from Eritrea are killing, you know, their brothers and sisters in Tigray? I mean, this is really one people, one language, one culture, same food, same coffee, same everything. But this has been after at least a 20-year campaign by President Isaias against Tigray, and in which this whole genocidal language and thinking has been prepared. So this is not something that happened from one day to the next, and it follows on what President Isaias has done, is really creating an idea that people are property, and that this instills a slavery-like condition in Eritrea, in Tigray, and also everybody who is trafficked from these places once the troubles have started now into Libya and, I mean, the Mediterranean Sea. You were singing about it. And that has been accompanied by a lot of misinformation, and also misinformation that is very confusing, that is against colonialism, against imperialism, etc. So those that would have an Eritrea committee or would have a Tigray committee, they're really confused by the ideological things that accompany this. So it's confusing. But I think it is therefore really, really important to have these kind of meetings where we can talk about these things and look at all of the different aspects of it. And one last thing is that this is more on the politics of it. I completely feel the sentiment that the people of Tigray are not going to sit in the country that has invaded them and taken away all those rights for 2 years in the most inhumane way possible. At the same time, I do have some concerns also that if Ethiopia would fall apart, it could be the starting point of a whole lot of conflicts, because none of these borders are going to be clear. None of the communities are so set that you would know this is exactly Oromia or this is exactly Amhara. So that also is important, because at the political level, they're not just dealing with the atrocities of what has happened in Tigray, but they're also trying to think of yes, business interests, but also looking at what are the consequences of this, and maybe sometimes out of self-interest. 120 million people in Ethiopia is a European concern from a migration perspective. So what I want to say is that we need to learn a lot more about all of these things that are happening to make sense of them.
Sure, last but very short.
Yes, also, John, we didn't invite him. But I want to say thank you for asking. I think this is a very complicated thing, and I'm trying to avoid not to say really like complicated things. But let's say, the peace agreement with Eritrea that you just mentioned was actually a war pact. So it wasn't a peace agreement. It was sold as a peace agreement to the world. And there were actors, powerful actors in Europe and in America as well, that just wanted to gloss that over. I myself have been writing just way before Abiy Ahmed came to power. The force that brought him to power was hate against the Tigrayans. And he continued, he carried that movement because it has a political currency to mobilize people against the Tigrayans. So really, it's not what it appeared when it was presented to the world. So really, there are a lot of lies, disinformation, but really the real causes are historical, colonial roots. People live around there very much in history, really. So what happened 100 years ago is very, very present and drives politics today. It's a very complicated situation. I won't go to explain that, but just want to give you a bit of a clue. But thank you for asking.
Yeah. There will be time after we will watch a dance and we listen to some music. But after that, there's still time in the bar and here in the hall to speak to Gebre, to speak to Mirjam van Reisen, and ask them if there are any questions left. But now it's really time for dance, for Tigrayan culture.